Hi, this is Bill Johnson. This is my case study EDL 851. A good teacher turns bad. Stresses at home create problems at school. First of all, category number one, the problem identification and analysis. What do I know? I know that Crestview Elementary School is one of three districts, or schools in the district. They're located in a very rural area. There's only 18 classroom teachers. The teachers have been together for a good number of years, and it is a proud community that takes pride in their school and their students. It is a successful school by all accounts that their test scores are above average, and the attendance is very good at this school. Category one, what do I know also? Mrs. Jean Wilson is a fourth year principal at the school. She has served 13 years prior as a teacher, and she changed very little in her first 3 years. All was going well. She seemed to have good support from the faculty, staff, and the community in her first few years. Mrs. Horton, a first grade teacher, started to act very differently in the spring of Mrs. Wilson's third year at in the building. She is a former teacher of the year, and she seems stressed out and less friendly. She had some major behavior changes that were noted by the other faculty members, as well as some of the parents, that she started to be non-cooperative. Mrs. Horton, we found out, husband left and moved out and left her to raise two teenage sons. What I know also, at the end of the school year came, and Mr. Principal Wilson hoped for some of the changes that could occur over the summer break, and they were Mrs. Wilson, the principal, was hoping for that Miss Horton would work out some of her problems during the spring break or during the summer break. The new year starts off very positive, and everyone is looking forward to it. Crestview was selected to pilot a new reading program. In this reading program, Principal Wilson has kind of backed this program, and it was supported by many teachers. However, Mrs. Horton disagrees with the program, and she started berating other fellow teachers that have supported it. She was really derogatory towards the reading program. So Mrs. Horton was asked to have a private conference with the Principal Wilson, but it still did not solve any of her displeasure. Principal Wilson receives complaints. These complaints in the first 6 weeks of that fourth year that Principal Wilson was serving started receiving multiple parent concerns about Mrs. Horton. Mrs. Horton, they said, was verbally abusive. She was yelling at first grade students when they made mistakes. She would arrive at school late, and when the parents tried to get a hold of her, she refused to hold parent-teacher conferences. Principal Wilson decides to set up a parent-teacher conference with one parent by the name of Mr. Stafford. Mr. Stafford meets with Miss Horton. The Principal Wilson sits in on the meeting, and it did not go well at all. It ended with basically Mrs. Horton yelling at Mr. Stafford, calling him a liar, slams the table, and obviously Principal Wilson has to stop the conference right there and assures Mr. Stafford that she will check into this situation. Mr. Stafford obviously is highly concerned. Principal Wilson promises to call them back later after visiting with Mrs. Horton. Category number one, the problem identification. What do I need to know? I need to know that I want to learn more about Mrs. Horton and what is causing these problems. Is she emotionally stable? And if she's not, how can we use her sick leave, or how can I help her and actually protect the students' learning at the same time? I would also want to visit with my superintendent and Board of Education and go through all the options that are available to us. I also need to know, what does the master contract say about situations like this? Is there a leave of absence that is necessary that can be used? Is it a paid leave or is it an unpaid leave of absence? Does Mrs. Horton need to be put on an improvement plan? Is there a probationary period? There's many different situations that need to be talked about, and it's every district will be a little bit different on how they handle situations like this. And it also might even come into play. State law may determine how you handle situations like this. It may go as far as teacher disciplinary policy. And another thing is, Mrs. Horton, it didn't say how many years she's been teaching, but she obviously, as a former teacher of the year, is probably been on staff long to have tenure, if the state recognizes tenure. What is the problem? The problem is Mrs. Horton is stressed and can't focus. The underlying problems is she has some problems going on at home. She lashes out at other teachers and students, and she currently is a distraction to the learning in our school building. Not her normal behavior. So my first response is going to be to communicate with Mrs. Horton in Category 3, proposed plan of action with appropriate strategies for implementation. Is we're going to communicate with her to get her help. The second thing we're going to do is allow some time away from the classroom for Mrs. Horton. And finally, we're going to develop individual return to teach plan that is going to give her ways that she can get back into the classroom. The first one was communicate with Mrs. Horton step by step. I would start by expressing my support and recognizing that she is a former teacher of the year in our district, and we want to help her through this situation. She should understand that we can't allow this type of behavior. Step 2, we're going to bring in other respected teachers that she may respect, and we're going to show some teamwork and caring, that she's not in this alone. The third and final step of this first on the communication is we may use some other school resources. We may visit with the school counselor, see support staff, maybe set up some meetings with other teachers who have gone through similar things, and determine, first of all, by visiting with her, is if she's really going to need a leave of absence. Number 2, allow some time away from the classroom. The first step would be to document what has already happened. Insist that Mrs. Horton takes some leave of absence, some sick leave or a leave of absence. And we're going to support her through this, and because we understand that she does care about kids. She's just going through a difficult time. We're going to establish some goals for return. We'll facilitate some counseling if it looks like she's going to need it. And we're going to do what is the best thing for the students and our school. We're also going to determine how much time is needed by talking with her and going through these steps. Communicate with her regularly during the time that she's away. She must document that she has had counseling. And obviously, we're going to hire a long-term sub at this time, because you never know how long this process is going to take. At this particular time, when she's removed from the classroom, we would communicate with the parents. It is a touchy subject because of confidentiality, but we'll let the parents know that we are going to do what's best for their students' learning process. Number 3, develop individual return to teach plan. Communicate and have support with Mrs. Horton. She must have proper counseling. We're going to set a minimum time frame that she's going to be away from the classroom, and how she can maybe get back into the classroom, and explain that if she doesn't follow this plan, there's going to be disciplinary actions taken, and that if she doesn't cooperate, it could go as far as that she could be reassigned to a different classroom, put on probation, or the final step would be the possible termination. Category 3, resolve the issues based on promoting the success of all students. What is best for the students? The students obviously needed a normal classroom. So to remove Mrs. Horton was the very first step so that they could have a normal classroom. We're going to hire a long-term substitute that hopefully will provide for them the normal first grade routine. Keep in mind here, we're dealing with very young kids, the first grade students. Resolution to the problem. Category 3, we're going to support Mrs. Horton in her time away, require that she have proper counseling, clear timeline and plan to return, and we're going to have options if she doesn't cooperate with that timeline. Category 4, debriefing and reflection. What was I thinking, feeling, and valuing? There was a lot that I was thinking and feeling. Why is this happening? How can I protect the students from what's going on here, this not normal behavior? How can I help the former teacher of the year to try to get her? And I want to value Mrs. Horton's teaching and the parents' concern through all of this. The unresolved issues are there's many parents' questions that are going to come up that I can't totally answer for them. How are the first graders going to respond to what's happening? How will Mrs. Horton respond? All of these things we don't know in the case study how they turned out. But another thing is the sub going to be effective? Category 5, reflection. How do I promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by enhancing instructional capacity? The academic success of every student, I think that I did a good job by acting on the parents' concerns in a timely basis, hiring a long-term sub that will provide a loving, caring classroom, and to get those first graders back to a normal routine. The second part was how did I promote the personal well-being of every student? Well, by removing the immediate disturbance. Mrs. Horton was obviously not functioning correctly, so we had to remove her for the personal well-being of the students, provide a normal caring classroom, and by working with the parents to address their concerns. The third and final thing, by enhancing instructional capacity. Well, we replaced Mrs. Horton with a long-term substitute, which would do a good job, and we have some very good substitutes throughout my years that I've seen. We are keeping the kids in the classroom. We didn't basically farm them out to other classes where they may be absorbed, but we hired a long-term sub. The plan of we established a plan of return for Mrs. Horton if she follows that, and the possibility, though, that we would be hiring a replacement teacher would do well to increase instructional capacity in that classroom. In conclusion, the case study, good teacher turns bad. An effective building leader promotes the success of all students by acting as an agent to enhance instructional capacity that will promote academic achievement and personal well-being of every student. Thank you very much for watching. That is my case study.